The New Mexico desert stretches out like God's own canvas, painted in shades of rust and gold. Out here, the silence runs so deep, you can hear your heartbeat echo off the mesa walls. It's ancient land, carved by wind and time, where secrets get buried in the sand and stay buried. Until they don't. This is the story of April 24th, 1964. The day a small-town cop named Lonnie Zamora saw something that shouldn't exist. 30 minutes that changed everything we thought we knew about what's possible. And folks, this isn't some wild tale from a guy looking for his 15 minutes of fame. This is about a man who wished like hell he'd never seen what he saw. Chapter 1. Small town. Big Sky, Socorro, New Mexico. Population 4,500 and change. The kind of place where everybody knows your name, your business, and probably what you had for breakfast. Lonnie Zamora was about as straight arrow as they come. 41 years old, married to his high school sweetheart, 3 kids at home. Been wearing the badge for 6 years, walking the same beats, chasing the same speeders, breaking up the same Saturday night fights. He wasn't the type to rock the boat, wasn't the type to make waves. Hell, he wasn't even the type to tell a tall tale at the corner bar. Lonnie was solid as the day is long. His supervisor Ben Chavez would later say, "If he told you the sky was blue, you could bet your bottom dollar it was blue." On that April afternoon, Zamora was wrapping up another routine shift. The sun was starting its slow dance toward the horizon, painting the desert in those colors that make you believe in something bigger than yourself. Just another day in paradise as far as Lonnie was concerned, but sometimes paradise has a way of turning upside down when you least expect it. It was 5:45 p.m. when everything went sideways. Chapter 2. The chase, blue lights flashing, siren wailing. Zamora had his hands full chasing a black Chevy that was doing at least 20 over the limit on Highway 85. Standard stuff. Bread and butter police work. The Chevy was hauling ass toward the outskirts of town, kicking up dust as it took the curves. Zamora kept pace, his Crown Vic eating up the asphalt. He knew these roads like the back of his hand. The speeder was running out of real estate. That's when he saw it. A brilliant flash of blue and orange light tearing across the sky, followed by a sound like the world's biggest 4th of July firecracker going off. Something had exploded out there in the desert, southwest of his position, maybe a mile or 2. Zamora eased off the gas. The Chevy disappeared around a bend, but suddenly that didn't matter a damn. That explosion could have been a plane crash. Could have been one of those dynamite shacks the mining companies used. Could have been somebody in real trouble. Training kicked in. Abandon pursuit. Investigate the incident. He cranked the wheel hard left and headed for the source of that light, following a rough dirt road that snaked up into the hills. Dust billowed behind him like smoke from a dragon's tail. The road was hell on wheels. Rocks and washouts that would have made a mountain goat think twice. But something was pulling him forward. Some gut instinct that said people might be hurt out there. 5 minutes of bone-jarring driving later, he crested a small rise, and his world turned inside out. Chapter 3. What shouldn't be there? Down in the arroyo, maybe 600 yards out, sat something that had no business being there. A shiny, egg-shaped object about the size of a car, but it sure as hell wasn't any car Lonnie had ever seen. No wheels, no license plate, no doors that he could make out, just a smooth metallic surface that caught the late afternoon sun like polished chrome. And beside it, 2 small figures in white coveralls, moving around the object like they owned the place. Zamora blinked hard, rubbed his eyes, looked again, still there. His cop instincts took over. He reached for the radio. "Socorro Dispatch, this is Unit 2. I'm investigating what appears to be an incident southwest of town. Requesting backup." The dispatcher's voice crackled back. "Copy that, Lonnie. What's the nature of the incident?" "Good question. How do you describe something that doesn't fit into any category, you know?" "Looks like a vehicle accident. Possible injuries. I'm moving in to investigate." He clicked off the radio and started working his way down the slope. moving careful-like through the mesquite and creosote bush. The closer he got, the clearer the details became. The object was perfectly smooth. No rivets, no seams, no markings of any kind. Just that weird metallic shine that seemed to shift and change as you watched it. The two figures looked to be about the size of kids, but something about the way they moved. It wasn't right. Too stiff, too mechanical. Then one of them spotted him. Both figures stopped what they were doing and looked directly at him. For maybe 10 seconds, though it felt like 10 years, man and whatever they were stared at each other across that desert valley. Then, quick as a heartbeat, they were gone. Not running, not hiding behind the object. Gone, like they'd never been there at all. That's when Lonnie heard the sound. Chapter 4. The sound of impossible. It started low, like a hum you feel in your chest more than hear with your ears, but it built fast. A roar unlike anything Zamora had ever heard. Not a car engine, not a jet, not a helicopter. Something completely alien to his 41 years of living on this earth. The object started to move. First, it lifted straight up from the desert floor. No visible exhaust, no propellers. No damn thing that should have been able to get something that heavy off the ground. Zamora hit the deck behind a clump of sagebrush, scared out of his mind. The roar was deafening now, vibrating through the ground, through his bones, through his soul. The air around the object shimmered like heat waves rising off summer pavement. But this wasn't heat. This was something else entirely. Through the branches, he watched the impossible happen. The thing rose about 20 feet, hovered for a moment like it was taking one last look around, then shot off horizontally faster than anything had a right to move. Not gradually, like a plane taking off. Instantly, like someone had fired it from the world's biggest slingshot. In seconds, it was gone over the distant mesas. The roar cut off like someone had flipped a switch. The desert went back to being quiet. Zamora stayed behind that bush for a long time, shaking like a leaf in a windstorm. Not from the cold, the desert air was still warm, but from something deeper. From having seen something that rewrote the rules of everything he thought he knew. Finally, moving real careful-like, he got up and walked to where the object had been. The ground told a story. Chapter 5. Evidence in the Earth. Where that thing had sat, the desert bore witness. 4 circular impressions in the hard pan, each one about 18 inches across, and pressed down into the caliche like something incredibly heavy had rested there. They formed a perfect rectangle, spaced just right for landing gear. But what kind of landing gear leaves marks like that? Zamora knelt beside one of the impressions. The earth was compressed harder than concrete, almost glassy. Around the landing marks, the creosote bushes were singed, not burned black, but dried out, like every drop of moisture had been sucked right out of them. There was a smell in the air, too. Metallic, like the taste you get when you bite down on aluminum foil, mixed with something sweet that he couldn't place. With hands that wouldn't quite stop shaking, Zamora pulled out his notepad and started documenting everything. Measured the impressions, drew diagrams, wrote down every detail he could remember. The small figures in white, the smooth, seamless object, that impossible sound, the way it just left, like gravity was more of a suggestion than a law. He was still writing when he heard a car engine grinding up the hill. Sergeant Sam Chavez, responding to his call for backup. "Lonnie? Where you at, partner?" Zamora waved from the arroyo. "Down here, Sam. And buddy, you are not gonna believe this." Chavez picked his way down the slope, huffing a little in the thin desert air. He'd worked with Lonnie for 3 years, knew him to be level-headed, reliable, honest as the day is long. But the look on Zamora's face right now, that was pure shock, like he'd seen a ghost. "Jesus, Lonnie, you look like you've been through a blender. What the hell happened out here?" Zamora pointed to the impressions in the ground. "Sam, you're gonna think I've lost my marbles, but..." And he told him everything. Chapter 6. The Word of a Good Man. Sam Chavez listened without interrupting. 3 years of partnership. 3 years of watching Lonnie Zamora write clean reports, give straight testimony, make sound decisions under pressure. Lonnie Zamora didn't lie. Hell, the man couldn't tell a convincing lie if his life depended on it. But what he was describing... "You sure about what you saw?" Chavez asked when Lonnie finished. "Sam, I know how this sounds. I know it's crazy. But look at these marks. Feel this ground. Smell that air. Something was here. Something that sure as hell wasn't made in Detroit." Chavez squatted down and examined the impressions. They were real, all right. Fresh, deep. The earth around them was still warm, even with the sun going down. "We need to call this into the feds," he said finally. Over the next few hours, the site turned into a 3-ring circus. FBI agents drove down from Albuquerque. Photographers documented every square inch. Investigators collected soil samples and pieces of the burned vegetation. Major Hector Quintanilla Jr. from the Air Force's Project Blue Book flew in personally from Wright-Patterson. Blue Book was the government's official program for investigating UFO reports, most of which they explained away as weather balloons, swamp gas, or overactive imaginations. Quintanilla was a professional skeptic. His job was to debunk, explain, rationalize, make the weird stuff go away so regular folks could sleep at night. But after interviewing Zamora for hours, after examining the physical evidence, he wrote something in his official report that he rarely wrote. "This case puzzles me. We cannot find a conventional explanation for Officer Zamora's experience." Coming from Blue Book, that was like saying they'd found a unicorn. But the investigation was just getting started. Chapter 7. The experts weigh in. In the weeks that followed, Socorro became ground zero for one of the most intensive UFO investigations in American history. Dr. J. Allen Hynek showed up to conduct his own analysis. Hynek was an astronomer, Northwestern University professor, and Blue Book's scientific consultant. He was also famous for being harder to convince than a Missouri mule. "I expected to find some rational explanation," Hynek said years later. "An elaborate hoax, maybe, or an honest mistake about some natural phenomenon." But the more he dug, the more interested he got. The soil impressions were analyzed by experts. No signs of fakery. The compression would have required tremendous pressure, far more than any equipment available locally could produce. The burned vegetation was studied by botanists. The pattern of desiccation was consistent with exposure to intense heat, but there were no chemical residues that would indicate conventional fuel. Investigators interviewed everyone within a 30-mile radius. Nobody had seen or heard unusual aircraft that afternoon. No military bases reported activity in the area. Most intriguing of all, other people started coming forward. Chapter 8. More pieces to the puzzle. Opal Grinder was working at a gas station on the road into Socorro. Around 6 p.m. on April 24th, she saw something strange in the sky. It was like a real bright blue light, she told investigators. Moving faster than any airplane I ever saw, and it wasn't making any noise at all. The timing matched Zamora's sighting perfectly. Then Paul Keyes stepped forward. He was a tourist, driving through the area when he spotted a bright oval object crossing the road at exactly the time Zamora described his encounter. "Thought it was a reflection on my windshield," Keyes admitted. "But when I stopped the car and got out, I watched that thing disappear behind those hills to the southwest." 5 independent witnesses, 5 people who didn't know each other, reporting similar sightings at the same time and place. The conspiracy that would have been necessary to fake such an event was starting to seem more impossible than the sighting itself. But the most convincing evidence came from an unexpected source. Chapter 9. The symbol nobody talks about. During his initial investigation, Zamora described a symbol he'd seen on the side of the object, a red marking like a logo or identification. He drew it from memory, A vertical line with an arc underneath and a horizontal line crossing through the middle. Simple, but distinctive. In the first days after the incident, Zamora mentioned this symbol publicly. But then, something weird happened. Air Force officials asked him to stop discussing the symbol. They claimed it might compromise the investigation if specific details were released prematurely. Zamora agreed. But in private conversations with investigators, he kept insisting on what he'd seen. "It was as real as my hand," he told Dr. Hynek. "Etched or painted right into that metal. Wasn't no imagination." Decades later, declassified documents would reveal something interesting. The CIA had instructed the Air Force to discourage public discussion of specific details in UFO sightings, especially symbols. Why? The documents suggest intelligence agencies used unique details to verify the credibility of future reports. If only genuine witnesses knew certain specifics, it would be easier to identify copycats. But some folks weren't buying that explanation. Maybe there was another reason for the secrecy. Maybe that symbol was more important than anyone was willing to admit. Chapter 10. A life changed forever. 60 years have passed since that afternoon in the New Mexico desert. Lonnie Zamora never changed his story. Not one word, not one detail. Right up until he died in 2009, he maintained that he'd seen something not of this world. "I know what I saw," he'd say whenever anyone asked. "And I don't give a damn if people believe me or not. I was there." The Zamora case, as it came to be known, remains one of the most credible UFO sightings ever documented. Multiple witnesses, physical evidence, extensive government investigation, and no satisfactory conventional explanation. Dr. Hynek, initially skeptical, later called it one of the most puzzling cases of his career. "If we can't trust the testimony of a trained police officer," he wrote, "then our basis for determining truth about any event becomes pretty shaky ground." Other investigators went further. Ray Stanford, who arrived in Socorro hours after the incident, collected evidence that was never fully explained. Microscopic metal samples found at the site, with unusual composition, residual radiation that persisted for weeks. But maybe the most important legacy of the Zamora case isn't the physical evidence. Maybe it's what it represents. Chapter 11. Between Earth and Sky. One afternoon in the desert, an ordinary man. A moment that defies explanation. The Lonnie Zamora case is more than a UFO sighting. It's a window into the limits of what we know, what we can prove, what we're willing to accept. In an age of scientific skepticism and rational explanations, cases like this remind us just how much mystery still hangs in the air between Earth and sky. Socorro, New Mexico, remains a small town. Occasional tourists visit the landing site, marked now by a simple roadside sign. The desert stays the same, quiet, vast, keeping its secrets. But something shifted that day in April 1964. A certainty was shaken. A possibility was planted. And sometimes, when the wind blows through the arroyos at sunset, you can almost hear the echo of that impossible roar, almost see that metallic gleam disappearing behind the mesas, almost feel the presence of something beyond our understanding. Lonnie Zamora wasn't a dreamer. He was a man of facts, evidence, concrete truths. But that afternoon in the desert, he touched something that transcends facts. Something that reminds us the universe is stranger, wilder, and more wonderful than we dare imagine. And sometimes, just sometimes, it comes down to visit. You've been listening to The Desert Encounter, the Lonnie Zamora case. If you enjoyed this story, remember to subscribe and check out our other deep dives into the mysteries that refuse to be solved. Until next time, keep looking up, because you never know what might be looking back.